Hello everyone, DMGeezerjim here. More monster talks, having some fun. We're gonna go down the undead trail a little bit this time. Hit a common monster, makes its appearance in a lot. First and foremost, thanks for joining me in this short. Just gonna try to hit on a couple things about each monster. There's so many monsters. Just for reference, we're using Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition officially supported creatures throughout the different setting books and all of that, but we're always going to try to focus on stuff that everyone has access to whenever possible. When we can't, sometimes there's other stuff. It is what it is. But today we're going to look at the ghoul, and its cousin, the ghast, kind of by proxy. Three things that we want to talk about. Three things that I think you should know about a ghoul or ghouls and ghasts to help build your campaigns out a little bit better, to bring some more life to encounters, to add a little bit more whatevers. If you've never used one, you never used ghouls before, welcome. And we're going to talk about using these general purpose shock troopers is what I look at them as far as undead stuff go. So the first thing we want to talk about is ghouls are fiendish and abyssal in nature. They're not necessarily reanimated like skeletons or zombies. They're not necessarily haunted beings like a wight or a ghost, their spirit that's been trapped in. A ghoul is more of a manifestation of fiendish energy in a corpse given eternal hunger. That's according to the 5th edition rule set, and the 5th edition rule set is kind of in support of the original writing as well, kind of lending into the credence. That's why elves are immune to it, because the original ghoul was a fallen elf. So first thing to remember about ghouls is while they are undead, they're not created undead. They're summoned undead, not necessarily something that a warlock or a necromancer or something is using with animate dead, create dead type of a thing. First thing to keep in mind, okay? Gives you a lot of freedom and flexibility. Gives you a lot of play space to run around with these little dudes, and make sure that, at the end of the day, you're going to have many different places to use ghouls. I think at a certain point, ghouls should supplant your use of zombies for low level fodder. Meaning, when your party's 5th, 6th, 7th level, 4 or 5 ghouls should replace the 4 or 5 zombies you were using at first level. Okay, with their abyssal origins, you have a lot of room. With the fact that they live eternally, despite the fact that they hunger for flesh at all times, a ghoul doesn't necessarily have to eat. It gains no sustenance from what it eats, so they can live forever. They hunt and they roam. Which brings us to point 2. Ghouls are, for all intent and purposes, social creatures. They hunt in packs. They hunt at night. They're driven by an insatiable hunger. Very rarely are you going to end up in a situation where ghouls have been sitting dormant in a crypt far away in the mountains for a long time. If they were summoned there, if they were animated in that crypt, if whatever their reason for being that far remote, as a dungeon master, make sure they're pack hunt. Remember, they are pack hunters. They're not going to stay where they are. They work in a pack. They're driven by hunter. The rule number 2 is they're always going to be on the move. So when you're using ghouls, that gives you reason, but that also gives you something to keep in mind. You always have a reason to use a pack of ghouls terrifying the countryside. They're going to move around at night. They don't have sunlight sensitivity. That's a little bit more of a theme, so there's nothing wrong with using ghouls in broad daylight. Just thematically, they prefer hunting at night. But, you're not limited in that, so you have the freedom for that. They're pack hunters. They're going to move. They're going to be hunting together. They have an intelligence of 7. They're not going to always blindly run at things, okay? So, once you understand their origins and the fact that their social aspect and pack hunters, we're going to lean into their abilities. They don't have a lot going for them, guys. They're immune to poison. They're immune to charm, exhaustion, and poison condition. Armor class 12, hit points 22, kind of squishy. Their big brother, let's look at the big brother, the ghast as well. Apologies as I flip over to him. Again, kind of like wolf versus direwolf, ghast versus ghoul. There will be one slight thing to keep in mind on the ghast. We'll touch on that at the end of the video. So they're going to work together to surround their party, to ambush the enemies, things like that. They don't have really good hiding. They don't have anything like that. They're standing ground troopers. Their number one threat is the fact that you get paralyzed. If you fail a DC 10 Constitution saving throw, if your players fail a DC 10, they're going to be paralyzed. Now, DC 10 con is not hard, guys. Higher level parties, that's shrugging it off. That's going to be bad luck. So that's why I call these shock troopers for mid-level group a mid-level play, higher level play. A group of these is a active fight for a mid-level party, but it's not a deadly fight. The threat of paralysis is more than the impact of paralysis. Now, the problem for low-level play is what we're talking about in part 2. They're pack hunters. 2, 3, 4 ghouls can be very, very overwhelming for a low-level party. Challenge rating of 1 would say one of these is a threat for a group of 4 level 1s. I don't think it's that much of a deal. They don't have any immunities. 4 level 1s could kill this in a round, if I'm honest with you. But 3 of these attacking a party of level 1, suddenly 2 people end up dropping their saving throws, and now it's a 3-on-2, and then it turns very deadly. So a pack of ghouls is deadly for a low-level party, just based on statistical probability of someone getting paralyzed. So that's the second thing to keep in mind when you're setting these things up. Ghasts, let's go ahead and talk about them. They typically lead the ghoul party. Slightly more armor class, slightly more hit points, resistant to necrotic, the same other immunities, but they have a stench ability. They be so stonky and so bad that if your players are within 5 feet of it, they got to save on poison, save it on DC 10 Constitution, or it's like, oh, that thing smells so bad that I can't even stand be around it. Let's get in a little closer. A little nastier looking, right? So, adding a ghast to the paradigm can change in a little bit if you get lucky with the poisoned. Getting a couple people off balance on disadvantages on that. And then the turning defiance is helpful. If you know your players are a higher level cleric, they're going to do their channel divinity to turn undead, and you want your ghouls over here to have any sort of impact because they're low CR, make sure that you're dropping the turning defiance that a ghast has into that, okay? So knowing how the pack tactics work, they don't get advantage on any of that, just knowing they fight together and work together, okay? Tactically speaking, you can be very, very mean or very, very nice depending on how things are going. Remember, when someone is paralyzed, the condition for paralyzed states that a paralyzed creature is incapacitated. They automatically fail strength and dex saving throws. Attacks against that creature have advantage, and if a creature is adjacent to it within 5 feet, the hit's critical. So that can be really, really, really bad for a low-level, mid-level character that gets paralyzed and gets hacked on. The alternative to that is 2 alternatives you have tactically with that. Alternative number 1 is you go and attack the next person. The ghouls are going to paralyze everyone and drag them off to their lairs and chew on them, right? Sometimes that's the best because your players do get a save at the end of each of their turns against the paralysis. So if the party has some bad luck, you can move on to the next target. If the party is raining good luck, then you might feel obligated to maul that character. Pay attention to hit points, all of that. If you want to be a hardcore brother or a hardcore sister and you really want to bring the heat with a ghoul or a ghast, you can do it. It can be done. Knock them lucky with a paralysis. 2 other ghouls jump on that sucker and pound on him for advantage hits and critical hits. That can pose a big problem. Okay? But the last thing I want to talk about is kind of an inconsequential, but at the same time, loot. Ghouls eat bodies. They collect corpses. They want dead flesh. If they kill you, they're going to drag you off and let you marinate for a little while. So a ghoul lair should be accessible to the party because the ghouls are similar in build to a party. They're medium creatures. They have 30 feet movement. They don't get to climb. They don't fly. So the third thing I want you to think about is ghouls should be a pretty good source of lair or quest MacGuffins or something like that. A lot of times we use the threats of a ghoul 2 or 3 moving around just to keep our parties on our toes, or on their toes. But a ghoul lair of 5 or 6 ghouls and a ghast can become a great target or destination for your quest. They drag bodies back and eat them at home. There's going to be a lot of stuff in your quest. So if you're looking for something for a challenging MacGuffin, or if you need to drop a couple parties or drop some extra coin in your party's way, rather than feeling like they looted they got lucky and skinned a bear and found a +2 dagger in its gullet, which I'm not going to comment on. It happens, but this is a logical, viable source for loot for your party, for upgrades for your party, for that first +1 magic weapon, or that first ring of warmth, or that first level 2 scroll of web, so your wizard can add it to their inventory. Because the ghouls, if you take it to the conclusion, understanding that they're demonic in nature, which means they're abyssal in nature, which means they're eternal. They're not going to die, okay? Unless they're destroyed, they will eternally gather. As long as they exist, they will gather bodies and devour the bodies. If they're near a good source of food, then they're going to have a sizable lair. Number 2, they're pack hunters. So they're going to be dragging things back with them to their lair as a group, which is going to allow for a lot of stuff. Number 3, because they're pack hunters, because they collect the dead, collect the bodies, and feast on them, you have a wonderful, viable point to add just a big old honking pile of loot, or the MacGuffin that you need, or whatever. So, ghouls, both from a combat standpoint, can be dangerous. From a story standpoint, they can be useful. But always remember this sucker. On a bad day, you can mess your party up with DC 10. DC 10 con save doesn't sound high, but if you don't have a +5 on your save and you roll a 1 through 5, which is a 24% chance of doing 25% chance of doing that, well, I guess a 1 through 4, 20% chance of doing that, you're going to get paralyzed. So there's usually a 10 to 20% chance on any hit from a ghoul, a little bit higher with the gas, that the party member is going to get paralyzed. So be cautious about their use. But yeah, that's kind of it for this video. Real quick, like I said, one thing to remember: abyssal in nature, have a lot of freedom with that. They're not bound by being summoned. They're not bound by any given creator. You have story flexibility to add a lot of ghouls to any given scenario. There's something due to they're not dependent on being animated by a necromancer. You have a lot of play to use these independently of a necromancer story or something like that. They can be the first sign of an abyssal incursion into your world. Just remember, they are undead, but they're abyssal in nature. They're not summoned in nature. Number 2, they're pack hunters. They're going to work together. They're going to fight intelligently. You have to make sure that you're not obliterating your party with the tactics you use while fighting as a group. But they're always fighting as a group. They don't wander around solo hunting. If there is one left, he'll run off to find another pack to hunt with. Kind of, they're pack by nature. Because of that, that's a lot of paralysis that's coming at your party at the same time. Number 3, they're typically going to have a lair when they find a good hunting ground. So when they gather bodies, that means loot. If you need a place to upgrade your party's low-level to mid-level party stuff, here you go. If you need somewhere for that quest MacGuffin to be, here you go. Just drop a layer of ghouls somewhere off near a graveyard. Lo and behold, one night quest, tough combat, cool tunnels, pile of loot, go on with their lives. But it's going to be a challenging fight the entire way. But yeah, thanks for joining me for this DM short, just talking about, a couple things to keep in mind, 3 things to know about ghouls. Hope you enjoy the video, or maybe know about, or keep in mind. 3 things to keep in mind as you're using ghouls in your campaigns and your adventures. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself, and I would love to hear back from you in the comments. As always, likes, follows, and subscribes are appreciated. Y'all be safe.